Perfect. So good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Sport BC Sport Smart for Runners, Sports Smart for Runners, Injury Prevention and Sport Performance Workshop. My name is Philippe Saucier. I'm the Manager for Sports Safety and Events Services at Sport BC. This evening, we'll take about an hour and a half to go through all of our workshop material. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to pop those into the chat and we'll get to those throughout the workshop. So just a little bit about SportMed BC. Obviously, you know who we are. You are taking part in our in some of our programs with our in-training programs. We're a professional non-for-profit society comprised of about 700 sport medical and paramedical practitioners in BC. We promote leadership and public awareness and education in the areas of sport medicine, sports science, sport training, and health promotion. We do a lot of medical event coverage as well, on top of our Sports Smart workshop and some of our sport safety courses, like athletic taping and sports first aid. So if you guys have any interest in those, you can reach out to us. I will have my email at the end, and you guys can jot that down and send me an email if you guys have any questions about those things. So the goal for this evening, we just want to raise injury prevention awareness for you guys as athletes and participants in our in-training clinics. We want to promote healthy and safe sport performance habits. And we're gonna talk about what can be done to help prevent injuries, specifically around running and in-training clinics. So just a reminder to turn your microphones on mute. Thank you. So a few things we're going to go over. We're going to talk about risk factors to injury. We're going to talk about warm up and cool down, talking about stretching, some strength and conditioning discussion, and then we'll go into some common running injuries that we've noticed over the years, and then some running safety pieces as well. So just before I get into that, a little bit of my background. I forgot to share it at the start. My original training is as an athletic therapist. I did my schooling out in Montreal in Quebec and worked in private practice and with sports teams. And I've been working on and off with SportMed BC since I moved to BC in 2010. I became full-time program manager here in 2016. So I'm well versed with our courses and our workshops, but also with my sport medicine background, I'm able to implement a lot of those things that I've learned over the years in the content for the workshop this evening. So the first thing that we need to think about when we think about injuries and injury prevention is we have to think about the factors and the risk factors for injury. And so what we see is there's extrinsic risk factors, which are things that are on the outside. So as an example, environmental conditions, playing surface, weather conditions, equipment, those types of things. So those are all risk factors that are intrinsic. We also have intrinsic risk factors. Those are having to do with the athlete. So you guys as runners, previous injury, health status, fitness level, hydration, fatigue, skill level, strength, agility, balance, coordination, and flexibility. So it's great to understand what the risk factors are, but the best thing to do is to know what you can control and what you can't control. So you have to focus, when you're thinking about injury prevention, you have to focus on the things that you can control. So as an example, intrinsically, we have our extrinsic risk factors, which are equipment. So if as an example, your shoes, that's a type of equipment. So making sure you have a proper size and you have the right functional shoe for the right foot type that you have, those types of things. Rules, regulations within certain facilities. If you're running indoors, they might have enforcements around different things. And then coaches training education. So making sure that you can get some advanced training, which is one of the reasons for the workshop this evening. Intrinsically, these are things that we can control as athletes. And so it's really important that you look at your previous injury history, which is very important. I'm just going to ask everybody to make sure that you're on mute. I'm just getting a little bit of feedback on somebody's microphone. Thank you. Making sure that you've done proper rehab of an injury and having a proper protection and bracing if you do have an injury and you need to train through that. Health status is important, so a nutrient-rich and balanced diet, making sure that you have adequate sleep. Fitness level is important, that you do the right training, and so within our program, in training is the whole premise of our program is to train you up to your goal that you have. So it's a 5K, if it's a 10K, those types of things. So we have an excellent program, and if you follow the program, then you're likely to increase your fitness level as you go through the clinic itself. Hydration, there's pre and post training hydration, water and sports drinks. Those are things that we can control. We do have a whole other workshop on hydration, and so if that's something that's interest of you, we can always discuss that as well. Fatigue, making sure that there's adequate recovery and sleep. Training load's important there as well. If you're training too much, you can get fatigued, and then fatigue can lead to injury. Skill level is important as well. So making sure that you have the fundamental skills, and within the in-training program, we do have kind of a build-up and within proper technique, biomechanics, and those types of things. So you guys are in very good hands with our program. And then strength, agility, balance, coordination, and flexibility. Focus training on all of these can help prevent injury. And so these are all different things that you can control. The first thing around warm up is you have to understand that even though that we are going for a run, there's still a warm up that needs to get done. And so warm up is getting the body ready for activity while reducing the potential for injury. So a lot of it will be dynamic. So prior to the clinic, there's going to be probably some warm up, some light jogging, maybe some dynamic stretching, and then either some sport specific stretching or some sports specific drills. So with running, you probably won't go into the drills, but you might go into some of those stretching components. So the warm up has a lot of physiological benefits. And so it does increase blood flow, it increases rate of breathing, which in turn reduces muscle stiffness, which also increases flexibility and coordination, and it mentally prepares you for your run, for the activity that you're going to be taking part in. Some components of a proper warm-up. So within a running warm-up, here are some examples: some jump rope or jumping jacks, high knees and butt kicks, some shuffles, steps, backpedaling, reverse lunging, single leg glute bridge, some planks, and you can also get into some sprints, either like an 80% run, those types of things. So these are all different components of a proper warm-up when you're looking at running. Everybody does get into their routines, which is really good, but making sure that you have the proper dynamic pieces in there is really important. Here's some examples of a dynamic components as well. So a walking lunge, sumo squats, skips, leg swings, torso twists, and arm circles. So these are all active or dynamic stretches that you can add at the beginning of your run. And then cool down. So even though some of your runs might be an easy run, if you're on a low impact week or you're on a recovery week, there's still a cool down that needs to happen, where you need to gradually transition your body from an exertional state down to a resting or near resting state. So an effective cool down will give your body time to recover from the demands of the activity, and it'll get you ready for the next session. So some of the goals for cool down, helping that heart rate and breathing gradually return to normal. It actually prepares your muscles for your next exercise session. It also reduces the immediate post-exercise tendency for muscle spasm or cramping. And then it also reduces muscle stiffness to allow for relaxation. And then lastly, it aids in the dissipation of waste products in the muscle. There's a lot of physiology on this slide. I won't go into all the details, but cooling your body down from an exertional state down to a normal state is really important for injury prevention. Here's a few components of a cool down. So generally with walking, you can just do a light 5 to 10 minute cool down run, and then some static stretches. We'll talk about that in a moment here. Hydration is important as well. Water versus sport drinks. Generally speaking, water is fine. If you're doing a high intensity, long duration exercise, supplementing with a little bit of sports drink is actually a good idea. And then making sure you have proper dietary recovery within carbs, protein, fats, vitamins and minerals in there as well. I know that there was a question ahead of time about nutrition, and I'll get to that one when we get to our nutrition component. Okay, are there any questions at this point? Or I should say new questions? Jeanette, could you let me know that first question that we had coming in from the participants ahead of time?
Absolutely, 1 second. I'm a runner currently getting out there 2-3 days a week, with my longest runs being half marathon distance. Any tips for someone like me looking to build distance to 50K, but still wanting to stay injury safe? How about post-run meals? What's best to eat, drink, and when?
Good question. And so I think that the most important part of moving your, gradually increasing your time will be to have a plan. And so if you are following a plan, it's a lot easier and it's more helpful, and your body can actually increase with you. And so I think that's probably the best part. The second one is making sure you have good recovery in between your sessions. So if you're doing a harder week, that's fine. With longer mileage, that's totally fine as well. But making sure you have a good cool down and good recovery afterwards. The nutrition piece, I'll get to that in a little bit. So hopefully that sort of answers your question. Can we go to the second question, please, Jeanette?
Yes, so I have a recurring issue that I think is a calf strain. Sometimes I get pain mid-calf that feels like someone nailed me with a golf ball in the calf muscle, and it embedded itself there. What can I do to prevent this or heal it once it's happened? Also, I'm cheating on the once question. Is there something I can do that can be done to loosen the IT band?
Yeah, so those, so that question, thank you for that question, whoever brought that in. I think it's really important to be aware of your body. We'll get to that question in a little bit. I just wanted to bring it up so that people knew that it was something that somebody asked. But we'll get to it when we get to our common injuries within our strain and muscle injuries later on. So thank you for that. Okay, so let's get back to our presentation here with our static stretching. So static stretching is you want to gradually lengthen a muscle into an elongated position. So you want to be holding your stretch. Come and stretch hold time is about 30 seconds, and that's 2 to 3 sets per muscle. It's recommended to hold the stretch until you feel the muscle relax. So often people don't hold the static stretch long enough to get that relaxation from the muscle. And then just stretching until you get a mild discomfort. You should not feel any pain when you're stretching. And then you also want to keep a good form when you're doing your static stretching. Just some considerations around stretching. Larger muscle groups will generally require the targeting of specific muscle fibers to achieve that full relaxation from stretching that I'm talking about. And so sorry about that. And so if you look at these different examples, so you have your pectoral muscles down here, you can see that there's different fibers, and each fiber, you'll have to stretch at a different angle to get the different fibers. Same thing here on the top right, you've got your green, blue, red. That's the hamstring on the back of your leg. And so that hamstring actually will have different fibers. And so you have to kind of work through the different angles of your hamstring stretch to make sure that you get the medial side, the lateral side, which is the inside and the outside, so the different fibers. The other one is here is your groin or your hip adductors. So you can see here there's multiple fibers within the groin muscle. And so doing a groin stretch is really great. As an example, the butterfly stretch is a good one. However, that doesn't necessarily always get all those fibers. So making sure that you target each different fiber to get that full relaxation from the stretching is really important. Here's some examples. We talked about the groin, the quad stretch here. You can see she has a nice straight back. The hip is a little bit forward and her ankle is nicely right behind her leg. Here, the hamstring, that's a good one. I do prefer, and the reason I have this picture up here is I do prefer that you keep your back straight when you stretch your hamstring, because that can actually aggravate your back a little bit if you curl forward. You don't have to touch your toe for a hamstring stretch. The goal of the hamstring stretch is not to touch your toe, it's to stretch the hamstring. And then down here on the right, we saw this one before, but the nice calf stretch here. And then it can get a little bit into the hamstring as well. Low back stretch, if you kind of sit back on your heels and you bring your arms forward, kind of that yoga pose, that'll stretch your low back. And then the shoulder stretch, there's lots of different ways to stretch the shoulder. You've got your rotator cuffs, you've got your pecs, those types of muscles. And so having your arms straight across your body or up against a wall, those types of things. So different positions for different muscles. Some common mistakes with warm up and cool down. Often in warm up, some people just, they get to the park or wherever they're doing their run and they just start stretching. You need to make sure that you're warming up first. So you need to do those dynamic and get your blood pumping and get that cardiovascular system going. Often it's not sport specific enough. And so they're not doing motions that are helpful for runners. Often it's one-dimensional and they often are ignored or overlooked. It's okay with the running to actually go into maybe a 5-minute jog or 5-10 minute jog first and then do your dynamic warm-up. That would be ideal. In terms of the cool down, stretching into painful ranges is not okay. Having a proper form. Often people don't hold the stretch long enough and then it's often ignored or overlooked. Sometimes it's a time constraint. People don't take the time to do it. They have to get somewhere else. They have to get home. They have to go pick up their kids or whatever it is. And so if you're not going to do your stretch or your cool down right away, make sure that you get that done a little bit later so that your body does have that ability to recover. Okay. Again, if you have any questions, you can just pop them in the chat box. We'll get to them in a little bit here. So the next section here is about strength and conditioning. And so you think about running and you're like, well, what does strength and conditioning have to do with running? It actually has a lot to do with running. And so proper training, strengthening wise, can actually improve your cardiovascular capabilities, which is in direct proportion of what you do as a runner. So increasing oxygen delivery, improving your heart rate, your blood flow, and obviously improving your endurance. Improving power and strength is really important as well. So it not only increases muscle mass, but it also increases muscle efficiency. So your muscles are more efficient as you go through your runs. It also increases athletic performance, durability, and strength and conditioning can also help prevent injuries, sprains and strains, fractures, and chronic injuries, particularly. There's lots of different types of strength and conditioning. I'm going to go through this list here, and depending on the type of activity that you do, there's specific training that is probably best for you. So if you look at resistance, there's different type of resistance training. There's body, you can use your bands, cables, free weights, kettlebells, weight balls, and then there's parachute as well that you can use. So creating any type of resistance is a good idea. Plyometric, it's a rapid stretch, rapid contraction type exercise. Those are really good in explosive sports. So running is one of those. You can do some plyometric training as you increase in your training capabilities. Speed, agility, and quickness, those are usually sport-specific drills and exercises. With running, you can add some of that speed and agility will come into the plyometric test type of training. There's also circuit training. Often it's a high intensity resistance training, which works strengths and endurance, and then interval training. So bouts of multiple timed exercise with some time rest periods. So often within the training program, we will run like hill training as an example, where you're doing a circuit or an interval of different bouts and times with rest in between. So that's actually a type of strength and conditioning training. And then lastly is endurance. So this is all cardiovascular cross training options. So rowing, biking, cross country skiing, and then running's in there obviously. So as a runner, doing what's called cross training is very important. You can do cross training with resistance exercises. You can do cross training with a different type of sport. There's just some examples there with rowing and biking and cross country skiing. We live in a beautiful province here in BC, and there's trails everywhere, and there's mountains, and there's hikes and all sorts of things. So getting out in nature is very easy for us. Being able to cross train is also important. So often, not only do you run, but you can do something else. It's really great for your cardiovascular system. Okay, types of injuries. Before we get into this, Jeanette, I saw there's a question in the chat. Can you bring that up for us, please?
It actually just says ditto on the calf pain. There's another person who is experiencing some intense calf pain.
Okay, we'll get to that in the strain section here coming up, so that's great. Okay, in terms of types of injuries, these are the most common types of injuries that that we've seen within the sport medicine realm with running. And so let's kind of go through each one individually and talk about each one. So the first one we're going to talk about is a sprain. So a sprain is an injury to a ligament, and ligaments run from a bone to another bone to protect the joints from excessive bending. As an example, on the top right here, you can see the ankle sprain, which is called an inversion sprain, and the picture underneath is actually an ACL injury, where there's an injury where there's a rotation, and the ACL, as you can see, is on the inside of the knee, and it just can't hold the weight of that rotational force, and it ends up either stretching or tearing. Common ligament sprains in your body as runners are lateral ankle sprains, ACL or MCL of the knee. If you do have a fall with running, you can sprain your thumb or your fingers. Also the different joints of the shoulder, depending on how you fall. So if you fall with an outstretched hand, or if you fall on your elbow and the force comes up through your shoulder, you could dislocate your shoulder, which is basically a sprain, or you can sprain the ligaments that are in there. So the management that we want to do for sprains, and this kind of comes into that question with the calf, which I'll get to in the strain section, is you want to do PRICE. So PRICE stands for protect, rest, ice, compress, and elevate. I will be sharing these slides with you all at the end, so I forgot to mention that at the beginning. So you will have a copy of these slides. But PRICE is you want to protect the joint from further injury, so either a taping or a wrap or something like that. Rest means removing yourself from activity at that point. Ice is putting ice on those acute injuries. And then compression and elevation. So you want to use the PRICE method in the first 72 hours of the injury, so the first 3 days. Afterwards, depending on the type of injury, you can use heat, you can do maybe more compression, those types of things. So you want to use that PRICE method for management of any sprains, which is an injury to a ligament. Secondly is the strain, which is an injury to a muscle or a tendon. So muscles are connected from bone to bone via tendons, and they help our joints move through those ranges of motion with muscle contractions. So muscle damage occurs when there's a partial or full tearing of the muscle fibers and tendons with the sudden overload or stress that happens. Often it causes pain with movement. It's obviously, as I said, best treated with PRICE method in the first 72 hours. So you want to protect the joint and the muscle. You want to rest the muscle, you want to ice it, you want to compress and then elevate it to help with the recovery. Often these injuries are best prevented with strengthening, stretching, and sport-specific training. Back to the question about the calf, you can kind of see here on the picture, you have the hamstring, which is on the top here, and then down in the bottom here, you have your calf muscle. So your calf muscle you actually have two calf muscles. You have your gastrocnemius, which are these ones that you can see superficially, and then deeper to the bone, you have what's called the soleus muscle. For the question about the calf, there's a few things that you can do. The first thing is hydration is really important to prevent, and nutrition, to prevent the cramping or the tightening of muscles. And so making sure that you have enough minerals and vitamins in your diet is important. Before running, some people like to, have a banana because there's a lot of potassium in there. That's a good idea. Over the years, I've used people that have like muscle cramping and those types of things, or who are prone to that. I actually have them have about a teaspoon of mustard before they do their activity. Some people might say that's gross. There is salt in mustard and it helps with the cramping. As for the injury to the calf, if there is that golf ball type tightness, or like appearance of a golf ball in your calf, likely there has been a strain or a minor strain that hasn't healed properly. So the first thing to do is probably follow up with either an athletic therapist or sport physiotherapist or massage therapist, and get some manual therapy done on that muscle. You want to make sure that there isn't anything significantly torn or hurt, or that you're able to continue. So that would be the first thing, is follow up with a sport medicine practitioner and get assessed, and then go from there. In terms of if it's just tightness, before you run, making sure that you have a proper warm-up, which we talked about, but also what you can add in your warm-up is actually get either a tennis ball or a lacrosse ball. And what you can do with those tennis balls or lacrosse balls, or even with a foam roller, is to roll out your muscles. So we'll talk about foam rolling in a little bit here. However, where it's really important to start is actually on your foot. So on the bottom of your feet, you can take that lacrosse ball, you can take that tennis ball, and you can roll the bottom of your foot for about a minute or two on each side. What that does is actually releases a lot of the fascia that's down there, which is kind of like fascia kind of intertwines all your muscles and connects everything. And so by releasing the bottom of your foot, you're actually releasing that posterior chain of all those, the gastrocs, the hamstrings, the glutes. And it'll actually help you and increase your range of motion through that. So we'll talk about foam rolling in a little bit here. However, in terms of warm up, including some foam rolling will be really helpful for that calf injury. So hopefully that was helpful. Just a reminder, I think somebody just came on, so welcome. We are going to be sharing the slides with you. So if you missed anything, we'll be able to get that information to you. And just a reminder to mute your microphone, please. Thank you. The next type of injury is a fracture. So a fracture is an injury to a bone. Bones allow for body movement, organ protection, production of blood cells, and storage of minerals. They're usually injured through bending. They're usually, they need immobilization to heal. So usually it's that 6 to 8 week time frame. Sometimes it requires surgery. Fractures are not as common with running. The type of injury that you have to be aware of within fractures is the avulsion fracture, which is where a tendon with a forceful contraction, the tendon will actually pull a little bit of bone off of its insertion point. And so that can be due to a strong force. So a quick acceleration, you're going uphill and you push off really hard, that could happen there. The other time that fractures will happen is with a fall. And so those are usually the times that you'll see fractures within those injuries to the bone. The next type of injury is a concussion. We do have a complete concussion management workshop that is taught within our sports first aid course. So if any of this information that we're sharing tonight is of interest to you, we actually have our sports first aid course running in person in our offices in North Vancouver, actually on Sunday, this Sunday coming up. And so if that's, you can find all that information at sportmybc.com/courses. And we go through our entire concussion management workshop at that point as well. So a concussion is defined by a pathophysiological process affecting the brain induced by traumatic biomechanical forces. That's a complicated definition to say something happens to the brain and it doesn't end up working properly. And so there's that physiological process that affects the brain and it does not work how it should. I won't go into too much of concussions, but on our website, we do have a lot of information. There's also the concussion awareness training tool. Parachute Canada is the organization in Canada that oversees all the concussion harmonization resources and education pieces. The CDC website down in the States has something called Heads Up. If you're a coach for a team of some sort, often you have to go through the Heads Up training tool. And then there's a video on YouTube called Concussions 101, which is a great little video that gives a quick information about concussion. So concussions, what you need to know about is recognizing if there is a symptom and being able to remove that person from activity and following up with a doctor. So any symptoms would be a headache, dizziness, blurry vision, ringing in their ears, difficulty concentrating, those types of things. Often it becomes from a fall or they hit their head. And so there's either a hit to the head or the chest or the face. And it creates those symptoms that can pop up. And the last type of injury is an overuse injury. So overuse injury is a repetitive submaximal load on the body's soft tissue without adequate time for rest or recovery. So there's a structural adaptation that happens. Often, most commonly type of injury found within running would be Achilles tendonitis, patellar tendonitis, shin splints, and plantar fasciitis. I will bring up the IT band at this point. There is kind of a debate in the sport medicine world around IT bands and how much you can release them or not release them. My experience as an athletic therapist and first responder throughout the years have shown that working the muscles around the IT band is really helpful. Some practitioners believe that the band is just the band and it doesn't have any elastic property like a muscle does. And so when you're actually rolling out the IT band, often if there is an IT band issue, it's probably due to a chronic tightness or either a pelvic dysfunction up higher in the chain. So if you can imagine your body, you've got your IT band, which is on the outside of your leg. It attaches down into the outside of your knee and it comes up into your hip. In the hip, there's a few muscles in there, your glutes. There's another one called your tensor fascia lata, which is your TFL. Those muscles generally, if they're not firing properly, for whatever reason, there can be extra demand on that IT band, which is where that pain comes from. Often people will complain of like a tightness or a sharp pain on the outside of their knee with activity. At the start of activity and at the end of activity. Once the body is warm, often that does not happen. However, with an IT band syndrome, as they call it, often the culprit is either there's a dysfunction where the pelvis or the hips are not moving as they should, and the muscles are not firing in the order that they should. And so you get some of those those IT band problems. If you are needing to release, or if you do have an IT band issue, again, following up with an athletic therapist or sport physio or physiotherapist is really important, just to see exactly what the cause is of the problem. Often, I would say most of the time, generally, the IT band issue is not an IT band issue. It's either a hip issue or up higher, the muscles are not firing properly. So working through the quads, we'll talk about rolling in a second, but working through the lateral quads on the outside is really important, because the IT band comes and kind of connects to that lateral quad through that fascia. And so if you can address the tightness through there on the quad, it'll actually help alleviate a lot of the pain through the IT band. And then working also through the hips, so rolling out and stretching your glutes, your TFL, and your hip flexors will also be really helpful. The overuse injuries often occur in early season due to lack of training when you start a training program. One of the beauty, and obviously I'm biased, but one of the beauties of our in-training program at Sport Med BC is that you gradually increase your training over time. And so you don't have too much activity too soon. And it does give time for your body to recover. And so we do keep that in account with our training. Okay, are there any other questions around injuries? I know one of the other questions that had come in was around preventing ankle injuries and knee injuries. And so hopefully some of the information that I shared so far is helpful in terms of having a proper warm up, making sure that you have the right technique, making sure that you know if you are doing too much to make sure that you're resting, and that if you do have pain, that you're following up with a sport medicine practitioner. Just on that note with the Sport Med BC practitioners, we'll be talking about that. Actually, I have another slide for that, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. Any other questions that have popped up, Jeanette?
There's nothing so far.
Great, awesome, thank you. Family life, love it. Okay, moving on. So we talked about recovery. So there's lots of different recovery techniques that we can use. Foam rolling is a great way to really get into the tissues. It's an easy way to do it. There's lots of different materials that you can use. You want to loosen the tissue. It also increases blood flow. Foam rolling can be used in both warm up and cool down. The only thing that will differ is the speed at which you're doing your rolling. So with warm up, you want to warm up the tissue, so you want to be rolling a little bit quicker. Earlier, I talked about rolling the bottom of your feet. You want to have, you want to get a nice quick roll in there. It's a quick and not a slow, long motions. In the cool down, that's where you can go a little bit slower, a little bit longer amplitude, and you're almost mimicking like a stretch at that point. It also helps, foam rolling also helps with increasing mobility and flexibility. There's a lot of different ways of foam rolling and different materials that you can use. So the first most common, as you can see here on the picture, is the actual foam roller. You can also use a water bottle. If you have an injury, so you can see here, they're doing that lateral quad and the IT band at the same time here. And so that's kind of the position you want to be using for that. The water bottle is, if you do have an injury, you can actually use the water bottle and put it in the freezer. It'll freeze, and then you're almost doing like an ice massage. So that would be more for like after or post activity, not really necessarily before. You can also use a ball. So I mentioned tennis or lacrosse ball. You can also use like a hockey, like a ball hockey ball. Those work well as well. Moving slowly with control is important, especially in the cool down component. And you can also stop and hold on tender spots. There's a lot of resources around foam rolling. There's lots of different areas that you want to probably focus on. Here's a few that I had mentioned. So you have your RC, that's rotator cuffs or lats. So the lats through the back are important. Paraspinals up along the sides of the spine. Calf, hamstring, glutes. You have your quads, which are in the front. You have your IT band, piriformis, and then through the back as well. I see a question I think just came in. Let me just check it here.
No, it's just me trying to clarify. We had two Tinas at one point, so I was trying to make sure there wasn't someone missing.
Okay, perfect. And so when you're doing foam rolling, you can start with the foam roller. What you could also do is, as a lot of people say, well, how much should I be rolling? How long? Those types of questions. So when you start foam rolling, you kind of go with the pain level. So if you're going from a 0 to a 10 on the pain scale, where 10 is like very is your worst pain ever and 0 is no pain, you want to try and be in that 5 to 7 range generally when you start. If you go above 7, it's probably a little bit too painful, so you can ease off on the pressure. And you want to spend, if you're doing it in a warm-up position, you probably want to spend 30 to 60 seconds per muscle group, and those are quickly. If you're doing in cool down, you're probably moving again slowly with control, and you want to do slower movements so you can spend a little bit longer, 2 or 3 minutes on each muscle belly or muscle group. So just a few tips for safe running. So we incorporate a lot of these in our training, but first is having a buddy or running in a group. There's something wonderful about not only the social piece, having somebody to run with, but also it's safer to run in a group than by yourself. Having a cell phone is important. I know back in the day, people are like, we didn't have cell phones and it was fine, and that's totally fine. But it can be a little bit safer to run with a means to communicate with somebody. Addressing for the weather is important. So as the fall starts, obviously it's the rain is increasing. So making sure that you have the right gear, you have the right shoes, you have the right jackets and layers, those types of things. And then on the weather piece, but also as important is the time of day. If you run in the mornings, or if you run in the evenings, the days are getting shorter in terms of light. And so making sure that you do have a light with you, and so, or reflective gear so people can see you. It's so important to do that. I can't stress that enough. At SportMed BC, we do have running belts that have an LED light on it. So if that's something that you're interested in, it might actually be something that we have already shared with you or that you got with the registration. But if you do want extras, we do have some for sale, and you can find that on our shop online, or you can reach out to your clinic coordinator or to Christina or myself, and we can get those to you. And then again, warm up and cool down. I can't stress that enough. Warm up's really important, cool down as well. And then if you do have injury or if you have pain somewhere, following up with a healthcare practitioner. So I mentioned athletic therapist, a physiotherapist, a sport physiotherapist, a sport physician. So somebody in sport medicine. We do have on our SportMed BC website a list of practitioners that can help you that are in your area. So if you don't know anybody and you want somebody that's well-versed with sport, you can go on our website. You can also reach out to me and I can direct you to somebody in your area. The beauty of SportMed BC is we have practitioners all across BC, from on the island to up north to the lower mainland to the interior, the Kootenays. And so we do have practitioners all over the province that are there to help you to get better and stronger with your activity. So just in summary, we're doing actually very well on time. So we'll have lots of time for questions, but remember, you want to listen to your body and you want to communicate to a healthcare practitioner if there is an issue. a balanced body is a happy and healthy body. So having the right exercise training program, having the right nutrition, those types of things. Dynamic warm-ups before activity, static stretching after activity, strengthening, stretching, nutrition, and proper injury management is very important. And just back to the nutrition piece, we do have other nutrition resources for you guys. To the question of leading into that original question, there is a lot and sometimes overwhelmingly information about nutrition and the best things to do and not to do and those types of things. So the first thing I would probably suggest is to log your daily nutrition routine. You log the time, what you eat, and you do that for about 3 to 5 days. And then you can follow up with one of our Sportman BC nutritionists. We do have dietitians and nutritionists on our membership, and so to be more than happy to follow up with you and to kind of sit down with them and say, okay, here are my goals for what I want to do activity-wise. Here's what I've been doing with nutrition, and then they can set out a plan for you. So the thing with nutrition is that everybody is different. What they need is a little bit different. Some people, depending on what their goals are and how their metabolism and how their body functions, they need different things. Another good resource would be a strength and conditioning coach. They often have not only strength and conditioning training, but also nutrition training. And so having a combination of, I mentioned earlier, having the right training regime and having the right program is important, but then also having that with the nutrition side is also really important. So I know that's kind of a shorter answer to your question. If you do want to chat more about it, feel free to reach out to me if that person is here that asked that question. To reach out to me, we do have resources on our safety network and our Facebook page and through our socials. We will be sharing throughout, and we already have been sharing through our social media and on our website different articles and resources around different running topics, including nutrition, stretching, those types of things. I just wanted to acknowledge the financial support of the province of BC through the Ministry of Tourism, Arts, Culture and Sport and via Sport organization. So I will open the floor to any other questions. Here's my information, my office line and my email. If you want to jot those down, you can. I will, or if you want to reach out to Christina or Jeanette, you can do that as well. But I just want to open the floor to any questions at this time. If you feel bold and you want to unmute yourself and ask a question that way, that's fine as well. I'm going to stop sharing the screen, and I will also get my video back up and going. There I am.
So I'm going to go off of the one question, and he was talking about post-run meals, what's best to eat and drink and when. So maybe you can go a little bit further into sort of timelines as to, like what should you be kind of consuming, like, hour after.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think there has been some myths over the years with, you have to eat right away. You have to get in the first 10 minutes, those types of things. So research is now showing that it's about a 2-hour window after activity. You want to kind of replenish kind of all of the different nutritional elements. So carbs, proteins, fats, those types of things. So in terms of meal, it really depends on the person. Everybody kind of reacts a little bit different. Some people love having something right after. as simple as like a granola bar, having, you know, a banana, having a protein shake ready to go, those types of things is easy on the go. And then getting home and then having a meal. Some people like to do the meal thing. So they like to get home, they do their cool down, and then they have their regular meal. And so generally, I recommend a little bit of something right after. So either, like I said, like a fruit, some type of granola bar of some sort, a protein bar, or even a protein shake, getting some of those nutrients that you've lost with your training and kind of get them reabsorbed in your body is important at that point. I did see that recording question, and Janet, thank you for answering that.
So I'm going to call out Chloe because she is one of the participants from my group. Chloe, I apologize. But did you get your question answered as to maybe some help with your calf pain?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, just it would be great, Jeanette, if maybe we can trial some more warming up exercises before we get going in our runs. And I for sure need to check out rolling. So yeah, thank you. It was super.
You're welcome. Yeah. Yeah, and then again, Chloe, just to reiterate what I said, if this discomfort turns into pain and it's painful, I think following up with somebody will be important to do.
We have a question here. Is a higher or lower heel drop better for plantar fasciitis?
Good question. Michael, thank you for the question. Generally, you want to start with a lower heel drop, or even just a stationary heel hold to start off. And so if you're on the edge of a step, you're just holding your leg, you're holding your foot steady with no, down or up, no lift at all. That's called an isometric contraction, where there's a contraction, but there's no movement. And so that would be the first step. And then the second one would be a low amplitude lift. And then you can go as the weeks go by, you can increase the amplitude. And so, I mean, again, it depends on the situation. Everybody's a little bit different, but you can start off with something that's a little bit easier to do first. So lower amplitude and then work your way up. I hope that answered your question, Michael. Great. So thank you, everybody. I'm going to stop recording.